I'm a Canadian, and my name's Greg. Whose voice and whose opinions do we get to hear most often when we read the news here in Canada? My name is Greg Wycliffe. I'm the People's Party candidate for Parkdale-High Park. And in this video, I'm going to go over a few articles, mostly from the Toronto Star, and look at how they characterize Maxime Bernier versus the actual conversations that they've had. And also be a little bit critical of how some of these articles have been framed. Let's just jump right into it. And speaking of voices, we're going to start with Maxime Bernier's voice. This was Maxime Bernier sits down with Toronto Star editorial board. This was an hour-long conversation where they ask him all sorts of questions about himself and his policies. And I'll just give you this one short clip here.
What do you know about Mr. Scheer from running against him for leadership that is informing your campaign?
Yeah, first of all, both of them. If you look,
you have to pick one.
Both of them. If you look at my platform, and their platform is the same. On immigration, they're the same. On the cartel, they're the same. On foreign aids, they're the same. On tax reform, they're the same. On free speech, they're the same. I have a policy on free speech. On the pipelines, they're the same. I'm the only one who's going to use the Constitution, and yes, use the Constitution, the Section 9210, to be sure that we'll be able to buy pipeline in this country. And they're not saying that. On equalization, they're the same. I'm the only one who will change the equalization formula for being, listen to me, less generous. And yes, I'm saying that. And I said that in French in Quebec and in New Brunswick, actually, I said that. And when I said that, the journalist from CBC said, Mr. Bernier, you're in New Brunswick and you're speaking about against the equalization formula to be less generous? I said, yes. Do you know that at a provincial level, 60% of our budget is coming from equalization money? So you're saying to our people here that you're going to cut their provincial budget by 60% and you want to have some support? I said, yes. We'll do that on a transition period because it's unfair policy. We need to give the right incentive to every province to develop their own natural resources. And right with that formula, they don't have these incentives.
So as we can see there, Maxime Bernier is super passionate about his economic policies. And, you'll see a lot more of that throughout this hour-long video, which, of course, I will link in the description. Fun fact, when this video was first posted, it was originally unlisted, while all other conversations from the Toronto Star with the different Canadian leaders was publicly available. So that's kind of strange. However, I want to juxtapose that voice, what we heard from Maxime Bernier being passionate about economic policy, with this article here, which was posted 2 days after that interview, Why the Star Talks to Maxime Bernier by Andrew Phillips, editorial page editor. As a journalist, I've interviewed and platformed hundreds, maybe thousands of people in dozens of countries. Many of them were appalling. They included murderers and terrorists, an IRA hitman in Belfast who wasn't shy about describing his killings, politicians and generals who were later found guilty of carrying out genocide in Bosnia, literal neo-Nazis in Germany, and the politicians who fronted for them. All this was upsetting, even emotionally exhausting, to borrow a phrase, but it was my job to talk to whoever I needed in order to get the story, and the story was often dark. That's what journalists do, and it's what the Star's editorial board did this week when we sat down with Maxime Bernier, leader of the right-wing People's Party of Canada. So I asked whose voice and whose opinions do we get to hear when we read the news, and right now we're hearing the opinion and the voice of one Toronto Star journalist, Andrew Phillips. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible, but I really feel like he just compared Maxime Bernier to murderers and terrorists. And I know that, equalization payments and getting rid of those can be very scary to some people, but I really don't think that comparing Maxime Bernier to murderers and terrorists and people who have carried out genocide is at all fair or accurate. He also later says, it's no secret that Bernier holds extreme, even indefensible views on immigration, climate change, and a lot more. He gets asked all about that in this hour-long interview. And what is really unfortunate is this whole article here by Andrew Phillips, not once, I don't think at one point he mentions anything about what Maxime Bernier said. We do not get to hear Maxime Bernier's voice in this article that's all about Maxime Bernier, which is two of the characteristics that are common in a mainstream media article that kind of smears someone's character. We hear partisan voices. We hear the voices of people that clearly have their mind made up politically, and they, in this case, somebody who's easily is comparing Maxime Bernier to a murderer or terrorist. And then the characteristic number 2 is the complete omission of Maxime Bernier's voice. We don't even get to hear from Maxime Bernier. And this is very common in other articles that smear the PPC. We don't get to hear our views. We don't get to hear our platform. We don't get to hear any details on the policy. We don't even get to hear from candidates, or in this case, Maxime Bernier. And I think that's really, really unfortunate. And I would definitely make the argument that it's irresponsible as a trusted news brand like Toronto Star. I think it's very irresponsible of them to do that and completely omit Maxime Bernier's voice in this case. And I want to juxtapose this. Why the Star talks to Maxime Bernier, comparing him to murderers and terrorists, like at least an implicit comparison, and then compare their coverage on the Danforth Shooter. This was over a year ago now. Spare a shred of pity for the family of the Danforth Shooter. This is only 2 or 3 days after this man went on the Danforth and shot 2 young girls and injured 16 other people. I'm not trying to be unsympathetic to people who are mentally ill by any means. However, this is somebody who actually killed 2 innocent people and injured 16 others, and the Toronto Star is telling us to have sympathy. Whereas we are seeing a French-Canadian politician who is trying to impose some, new economic policies that he thinks is going to help all of Canada, being framed as comparable to a murderer and terrorist. I think this is very unfair coverage. If you are wanting to learn more about the Danforth Shooter, I will link an article to the Post Millennial where a very brave and smart independent journalist, Daniel Bordman, kind of breaks down other connections that this Danforth Shooter has. Basically, a friend of a friend found 33 guns and 42 kilograms of carfentanil, which is one of the most deadliest substances on the planet, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, there is more to that story, and so yeah, I'll just leave that if you want to look into that further. Let's move on to another article from the Toronto Star from award-winning journalist Heather Malik. Heather Malik is, look at all these honors and awards here. She is the winner of the Canadian Journalism Foundation Landsberg Award in 2015. She wrote this op-ed, this opinion piece. Bernier wants to break rules to sneak into TV debates. He wants to sneak in. So let me just read the first couple paragraphs. Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party of Canada, won't be allowed to join 2 TV election debates in October. We made it in to both of them. Thank you very much. There's a simple reason for that. He doesn't qualify. The People's Party must pass 2 of 3 tests. Heather is right about this one. We need to pass 2 of 3 tests. Have at least 1 elected MP, that's Bernier. Wrong. This is one of the tests that the People's Party of Canada can never pass or fulfill in this instance, because it needs to be an MP that is elected under the People's Party banner. Since Maxime Bernier started the People's Party only a year ago, he has technically never been elected as under the People's Party as an MP. So I want to point this out because this is a trusted news brand. This is an award-winning journalist who is getting some of the facts wrong. Yes, we need to pass 2 of the 3 tests, but no, this is not one of them. Have at least 1 elected MP, that's Bernier. No, that is actually one that we can never get. But we did end up fulfilling the second 2, running candidates in at least 90% of ridings nationwide. Good job, PPC. And or have a real chance of electing some of them. That would be Bernier, and I also believe Renata Ford in Etobicoke North is another one who is set to win this October 21st. I want to scroll down to another part of the article, which I found a little bit, I'll say, interesting. Instead of bemoaning dairy subsidies, they being PPC supporters, obsessed about the subject of Muslims, which they call political Islam. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. This is the voice of Heather Malik, an award-winning journalist, saying, I don't know what that is. I would hope that if you don't know what something is and you're a journalist, I would imagine that you would look it up and maybe do some research on it, especially if you're curious about it, especially if you're writing about it, especially if you're publishing it in a mainstream media news article. She goes on, Islamist entryism. I don't know what that is either. I would hope that you would want to Google this stuff and maybe look it up if you've never heard of it before. And again, I asked the question, whose voice, whose opinions are we getting to hear when we read the news? Let me introduce here, I hope this pops up properly, good. Andray Domise, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's a contributing editor to Macleans. So there was a televised debate at Macleans. Maxime tweeted out, wondering why I wasn't invited to yesterday's Macleans debate. A contributing editor to Macleans and debate commentator Andray Domise flipped off PPC supporters, called them Nazis, and wished them to die in car accidents. Contributing editor to Macleans flipped them off one more time on the way out with a couple suck ya muddas and hope you crash on the ride home thrown in for good measure. I don't know if you can see, he also says F Nazis. He also responded to Maxime Bernier's tweet and said F off Nazi scum. This is a contributing editor to Macleans magazine, which is essentially one of the largest and most trusted Canadian news magazines in the country. This is the voice we get to hear. This is the people that are writing and disseminating the news that we consume across the country. These are our trusted journalists, so to speak. I had to tweet at him. He has since blocked me. I said, people standing for fiscal responsibility and individual freedom, fairness, and respect aren't Nazis. As a PPC candidate who had a grandfather that fought against actual Nazis in World War II, I find your use of the term very ignorant, irresponsible, and divisive. Openly inciting hatred and violence isn't a good look either. However, I'd like to thank you for your contribution in ruining the authoritative credibility of Macleans and rags like it. Canadians are taking note of objectively idiotic takes from news outlets more and more. Thank you for watching this video. I'll pass off the question again. Whose voice and whose opinions are we getting to hear from when we read the news? I want to say a big thanks to all the new subscribers. Thanks so much for your support. I am Greg Wycliffe, People's Party candidate for Parkdale-High Park, and I'm going to keep making videos like these. Be sure to leave any comments below, any suggestions, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff, and we will talk to you very soon.